There's been a lot of research that shows that the health effects of having to deal with your identity being stigmatized, whether it's racism, sexism, all the isms, that having to deal with those things can really affect your mental, right? Really affect your mind state. Fat phobia is a part of that. And a part of the series got into how bias against fat people impacts their health. What came up during that part of the series?
Yeah, so I think an important distinction here is that we are all raised with the belief that there is a direct and a causal relationship between weight and health, or between fatness and health, that fat people are inherently less healthy than thin people. And actually, research has shown again and again and again that fatness does correlate with, or is comorbid with, a lot of diseases and chronic illnesses. But that does not mean that we can draw the conclusion that fatness is causing those diseases. And in fact, as Mikey pointed out, fatness and anti-fatness and the bias that fat people face actually can really contribute to, as you said, poor mental health, which can cause disease itself.
We don't actually have evidence that supports that fatness causes disease. We actually really have evidence that says fat people experiencing stigma increases their risk for many diseases.
Yeah. Big stuff to deal with.
Confounding variables.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. As a kid, I was what everyone was calling a chubby kid, right? And I remember I would go to the mall with my mom, and we would be walking around the mall, and by the end of the day, my feet were hurting, right? And it was always a constant problem. So my mom took me to the doctor, and then, she's like, what's going on with her feet? Every time we walk around for long periods of time, she's complaining about her feet hurting. And there's a doctor, he's like, it's probably because of her weight. She should probably just lose some weight, and then that foot pain will go away. And thankfully, my mother had the presence of mind to kind of do some critical thinking there. Yeah. And, she's like, you know what, actually, I also sometimes have this problem. My mother was not fat, when I was a child. But we had people of all different sizes in my family. And she's like, well, actually, we all also have flat feet. And shoes are not made for people with flat feet usually.
No, they're not. No.
Right? And turns out that was what was causing my foot pain. It had nothing to do with my weight as a kid. And it just really kind of hit home for me about how doctors and medical professionals can really be overlooking things sometimes because of what they see right in front of them.
Yeah.
Some parents are not as tapped in as my mom was. And there's been some recent developments when it comes to parents with children in larger bodies, right?
Yeah. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP, recently updated its guidance on childhood obesity. And as a side note, I tend not to use the word obese as an adjective, but obesity in medicine is kind of hard to avoid as a word because it is just everywhere and there's not a great synonym for it. So the AAP updates their guidance on childhood obesity from what they used to call a watch and wait approach. So basically, let's see if this fat child develops into a fat adult and address their weight then, to now really encouraging pediatricians to take a very aggressive approach to weight in childhood. So these new guidelines suggest weight loss medications like Wegovy or Ozempic, which is actually a diabetes medication that has been prescribed off-label pretty frequently, especially recently, for weight loss, for kids as young as 12, and then bariatric surgery for kids over 13. And Yvette herself was also a fat child and talked a lot about this on the show and has a lot of thoughts about how we treat fat kids and how fat kids in particular are targeted by society.
I think children have to endure so much already to, on top of that, surveil their bodies and the size of their bodies and aggressively intervene as their bodies are growing. That should stop.
Yeah. And I think a sort of side note that is worth adding here is that bariatric surgery is a pretty complicated surgery that can have, that affects the rest of your life after you have it. The suicide rates in people with bariatric surgery are higher than the general population. Your body can struggle to absorb nutrients for the rest of your life. And weight loss medications can have really drastic side effects. And the other thing about weight loss medications is that as soon as you stop taking them, almost invariably, you gain all the weight back. So all of this is assuming that that there's something inherently wrong with fat children and their bodies, and that rather than changing the stigma around them and the circumstances under which they are raised in a world that targets their bodies, we should actually be forcing them to change their bodies and encouraging them to change their bodies. And I don't know. I think if I had been offered weight loss treatment as a child, I think I absolutely would have taken it. I kind of know that about myself. I think that I just would have. And I know with all the information I have as an adult that is not a route that I want to pursue. And I don't know. I think that is a really tricky and harmful dialogue to wrap kids and their bodies up in.
Yeah, it's really scary. I think what's interesting and something that else that came through in the series is that people are so afraid of people being fat. I mean, fat phobia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it is like, I was told as a child too, like, this is dangerous, right? Something bad is going to happen if you continue with your weight.
You're going to die because of the size of your body, which just isn't true.
And actually what is true, what you're saying is that you may die by suicide if you take these interventions like getting that bariatric surgery.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, study after study has shown that staying the same weight, staying at a quote unquote higher weight is actually much healthier for you than constantly yo-yoing is what a lot of people call it. So losing weight and gaining weight, which is the sort of constant cycle that we face when we engage in intentional weight loss, because the weight loss industry would not be profitable if weight loss worked.
Weight loss.
Yeah, let's get into it.
A lot of times at the doctor, on social media, on a commercial, basically everywhere, it's implied that if you diet and if you exercise, you'll definitely lose weight. And on top of that diet and exercise are explicitly for the purpose of losing weight. Yeah. Which is wild, right? What are some of the problems with that framing?
Yeah, so I mean, what we know about dieting and about intentional weight loss is that the conservative estimate is that 95% of people who lose weight through dieting gain it back. And it actually is probably more like between 97 and 99% of people who diet to lose weight gain it back over, I think, something like 5 years. And most people gain more weight, like gain it all back and then some. So we know, first of all, that dieting does not work. And like I said, if dieting worked, the diet industry would not be profitable because they wouldn't have lifelong customers. And then what sort of is emerging is a double standard for fat people, when it comes to diet and exercise, are expected to prove that they are doing everything they can to lose weight, even if it means sacrificing their health for thinness. And we just don't have that same standard for thin people. We don't have an expectation that thin people are spending all of their time trying to stay thin, and that is what makes them worthy of existing.
Yeah, I mean, some people who are thin get asked when they're working out, like, why are you working? And it's just like, actually, physical activity is good for me, regardless of what type of body I'm in.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and what we heard from Myrna Valerio, who is a fat runner, she's an ultra marathon runner, is that she often comes across people when she's running on trails who will say, like, keep it up, you're doing great work, I used to look just like you, and look at me now. And she has been an ultra marathon runner for, I don't know, over a decade and has no desire, weight loss is not a part of her fitness journey. And everybody that she comes across, not in the fitness spaces she has built for herself, but everybody else that she comes across really assumes that she is there to lose weight rather than to exercise because it's good for her mental health, because it's good for her body, and because she has now made it into her brand and her career.